Halito, dear reader. Author Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer here. And I wanted to make a quick video, just a couple of minutes here, answering one of my readers' questions. This came from Dan after my virtual author talk in October, and he had a follow-up question, and it was such a great question that I really wanted to answer it via video and go into a little more in depth than having to type it all out. So I wanted to share this answer with you, Dan, and with the my other readers that thought you might be interested in this as well. So his question was, one thing I would like to hear more of is how the 19th century Choctaw people were evangelized. I do know that there was a mass movement to faith before the removal. What hooks in the Choctaw culture made them so open to the gospel? I guess this leads me to want to know more of Choctaw life in Mississippi and Alabama before the 1830s. Again, I thought this was a great question, and so I want to just take a minute to break this down based on my research, my multiple years of research of Choctaw history. I've been to Mississippi a few times, been to Nanaweya, our sacred mother mound. It's known there. Done studies on that older history. My books begin at the Choctaw Trail of Tears in the 1830s, but my research has gone to prior to that, especially with our own family research and history. We've been able to trace back to our first, the oldest name that we have, the oldest Choctaw name of Astanchi, who did not cross on the Trail of Tears. She was before that. She was born in the 1700s. So we've done a good bit of research into that, and I've read some books, but a lot of primary source material. And I think the one that I can point to as a really strong source to answer this question is the manuscript by James Culberson that I based Toshibas Story on, my book Toshibas Story, that takes place in the 1830s during the Choctaw removal from our homelands in Mississippi. One of the things that, so there's several things that point to what their life was like, what their religion was like, if you will, before the missionaries came, which they established in 1818. One of the things that people tend to generalize with American Indians is that Christianity was forced on them, and that was the case with some tribes. One thing we have to remember is not every tribe had the same story or the same experience. And for the Choctaws, they actually invited the missionaries in. Some were motivated by the education that they knew the missionaries would provide, and they wanted that for their children, that growth. And then there were those that they specifically wanted it for the Christian elements, for them to be evangelized, for them to be taught Christianity. And one of the things I think that really made them receptive to that was they already believed in one creator. They didn't worship multiple gods, and they didn't worship a sun god. That's a common misconception with the Choctaws, which ironically my understanding was started from the missionaries, who, when they asked the Choctaws if they had a superior being or something that they believed in, and they would point to the sun, and so they thought they were sun worshipers. But in Choctaw tradition, stories that have been handed down, they believed that the creator lived behind the sun, and the sun was basically his eye looking in on his people. So that began the common misconception that they were sun worshipers. There's also stories that they had visions of Jesus prior to the missionaries coming. One of the things is, they did believe in Jehovah, the creator, and I think that made them receptive when the missionaries came, that it was not a new faith. It was in addition to it was a completion of their faith. It was a completion of their faith in the creator, in one God, and the missionaries brought that to them, the full gospel to them. And with going back to James Culberson's manuscript, he wrote that around 1900, around the turn of the century. He wrote a lot of documents for the Choctaw Nation during that time. And his father, Toshba, John Culberson, was later his white name that he took. But John Culberson, who's Toshba, told his son this story of his experience crossing the Trail of Tears in 1834. And his father, Conchi, who was a full-blood Choctaw, didn't speak English, And he, on the banks of Friar Point on the Mississippi River, prior to removal, he imitated one of the missionaries and basically preached a sermon on there that to the ones there that wanted to take revenge, wanted to their homes were being burned and wanted to go to war, basically. And so he stood there and preached that, and he apparently had a Bible, because he talked about, I believe, this book makes a man new, whether he be red, white, or black. And even though the white man doesn't do what all is in this book, I believe that this is the way that we need to follow. And so Toshba told that story to James Culberson, who wrote those words down in the manuscript. There's a few other things in there as far as like going to Dan's question on what the Choctaw life was like in Mississippi and Alabama, and that's a whole other topic and definitely an in-depth one. But as far as from a spiritual perspective or some of their life ways, one of the things that Conchi talks about is, let's not do like we did in the old ways, where we would take up a butcher knife and go after, someone who had done us wrong. That it's time to put those old ways aside and embrace this new story that the missionaries brought to them. That's a very abbreviated answer to this, again, fantastic question from Dan, and I just wanted to share that perspective. Again, Toshibas Story has a bit of that. If you want to go look up James Culberson and then maybe just type in Conchi, Kanchi, and it should come up on Google search. The original manuscript is found at the Sequoia Research Center online, and that's where my mother uncovered it, and she's like, we need to write this whole story. And it's the manuscript, of course, goes into a great deal more, but that would be a really interesting read, Dan, if you want to read on that. And that's, again, what I based my book Toshibas Story on. I hope that answers the question, and for those that joined in on this answer, this Q&A, I hope that it gives you some more insight. Feel free to email me or drop a comment and let me know if you have any other questions on that. We can have a private conversation, or, if it's a great question, I may end up doing another video or something. So hope you guys enjoy it. Chipisa Lachiki. I'll see you again soon.